You have to understand that pain resides in the brain and not in the body. You may feel the pain in the physical body, but the pain response is elicited by the brain, and there's quite a few reasons why that pain response may come about. And one of them is anxiety, and that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. Now, the pain I'm talking about is idiopathic pain, which means pain of unknown origin. It's not from an injury. It's not from disease or illness. It's from pain that you have this back pain, knee pain, shoulder pain, whatever it's going to be. Maybe you get some imaging done, you go to the doctor, they see nothing wrong with you. And they'll say, well, there's nothing really wrong here, so there's nothing we can do. You know, you can get to take some painkillers, whatever it's going to be, and it doesn't work. So, and you don't want to go the painkiller route if you don't have to, obviously. But the important thing to remember is it's of unknown origins. And because of that unknown origin, it can create a lot of anxiety, which then makes the pain and discomfort even worse. So for this pain discussion, I'm going to be referencing 4 different sources of information. One, the John Sarno book, The Mind-Body Connection, which is a classic, and I highly recommend reading his book. He's not alive anymore, but he's a genius. The second is this book, Unwinding Anxiety. The third will be what I do for a living, Postural Restoration. And then the fourth will just be this easy, simple Tibetan Buddhism book. And they're all putting together different pieces of the puzzle for us. And the underlying issue, though, is tension. Tension that is being generated by the autonomic nervous system. In the Unwinding Anxiety book, the author does an amazing job of breaking the anxiety loop down into 3 steps. 1, there's a trigger. 2, there's a behavior. And 3, there's a reward. So in the regards to pain, pain would be the trigger. And the pain is saying, do something, change the situation because we can't go on like this. So pain is the trigger. The behavior is seeking help. If someone comes to me, I'm going to use postural restoration to help them resolve their pain in a very specific way. But then what's the reward? Resolution of the pain. Now it's important to keep in mind that postural restoration does not treat pain. Pain is a symptom. You can't treat a symptom. What you do is treat the pattern of bodily activity that is creating the pain. So whether you have SI joint pain, and I had my SI joint issues, neck spasms, plantar fasciitis, shin splints, generalized lower back pain, knee pain, hip pain, ringing in my ears, neck, I had everything. But at no point did PRI treat the SI joint pain or the plantar fasciitis or any of the other thing. It was treating the cycle of tension, of asymmetric tension, of asymmetric body position that my body was in. Postural restoration calls that the left AIC, right BC, right TMCC pattern, which just indicates that humans are asymmetric with a brain that loves to put us more over on our right side, and we have a bigger right diaphragm to breathe with. Hence, we are right dominant. PRI is simply treating that issue, that when this normal asymmetry becomes too asymmetric, our body cannot move without restriction. So PRI is not treating pain. That's the important thing to remember, because in the John Sarno book, he's saying the pain has no real physical origin, so if you do physical therapy, you're just diluting yourself and the pain continues. Well, postural restoration is not treating pain, and that's why they're not incompatible together. They're actually complementary. So on John Sarno's Healing Back Pain, the Mind-Body Solution, his working thesis is that people's pain symptoms and a lot of other different types of autonomic nervous system symptoms that I treat all the time, not because I'm treating the symptoms, because we're treating the position and the tension inside someone's body that's creating the issue. He was saying that people would come to him with back pain. They would do imaging. He would do testing. And he'd decide that, look, there's nothing physically wrong with your back. So where's this pain coming from? And over the years of doing what he did, and then in consultation with psychotherapists and psychologists, he came up with the idea, or someone introduced the idea to him, and he believes that to be the actual case, that the pain is a symptom to distract you from more underlying issues, emotional issues, and anger, he said, he thinks is one of the biggest things, underlying anger. And this is not a rational thought process. So if you try to, you can't think about this completely rationally, because a large part of the brain that is responsible for all this is not under conscious control. It just acts automatically. And it just happens to be one of those mysteries of the human brain that it may give you physical symptoms that are physically painful, but there's no physical origin. Again, it's idiopathic, unknown origin. And in his way of treating it, all he had to do was say, look, patient, there's nothing wrong with your back. Your back pain is coming from a different origin, and that origin is an autonomic nervous system that's tense for some reason. And so the reasoning was, if you now know that there is no actual nothing physically wrong with you, a lot of people would do what? Oh, they would relax. They would interrupt the cycle of anxiety and worry. And that's all we're trying to do, whether it's postural restoration or John Sarno or this unwinding anxiety book. You'd have to somehow break the cycle with awareness. Once these people became aware that there was nothing physically wrong with their back, they relaxed, if they could accept it. Now, some people will not accept, and they'll say there has to be something wrong. And I understand, I'm going to talk about that because that leads to the next issue. But for him, once people realized that there was nothing physically wrong, it was repressed emotions. And you might not even know what the issue is because it's happening in the unconscious, in the subconscious. But once you did that, if you talk to your brain, it sounds silly, but he just had people talk to their brain and say, look, brain, this is not real. I know there's nothing wrong with me. And lo and behold, thousands and thousands and thousands of people got better with no intervention whatsoever. In the Unwinding Anxiety book, the author is talking about this loop where there's a trigger, a behavior, and a reward. So ideally, someone has a trigger, pain. The behavior is they take action to try to resolve the pain. And if they come to me, I do postural restoration. The reward is they feel better. That happens a lot. However, sometimes people have tried so many different things and they're getting bombarded with so much information like, oh, do this, do this, do this. They don't know what to do. And so that's anxiety inducing because there's so many different conflicting opinions. Now, to me, though, that the fact that PRI works well is obvious, but I realize that's because I've been doing it for 11 years, and most people don't know what postural restoration is. So I have to realize I'm not the average person. The average person coming in knows nothing about any of this, although usually when they come to see me, they watch some of my videos, so they kind of have an idea. But a lot of times what happens is they have pain, trigger, they take action, fine, seeking help, but there has been no reward in the sense that there was no resolution. And that starts to bring about anxiety, like, oh my God, what if I never get better? What if there's something really wrong with me that no one can figure out? What if I have some sort of disease? Whatever. And that in itself often become, oddly enough, the anxiety, which kind of distracts you from the pain itself, becomes a reward. And you get stuck in this cycle of pain, anxiety, pain, and it just drives itself. You have pain, you get anxious about it, and then the anxiety brings about more pain. And what I know is whatever you're most fearful of, your brain will probably deliver up to you one way or another. And that's why you have to, the great lesson of life is whatever you're scared of, it will never resolve until you confront the fear. You have to move to whatever you're scared of, you have to move towards it. A lot of it is self-esteem issues for a lot of people. There's no doubt in my mind that a lot of people's physical pain is being exhibited as through tension in the body that comes from purely psychological processes that might go back to their childhood. I know for me, I'm sure that was playing a role. So what fears have I had to confront? Well, I've done 3 things that I never thought I would do. Well, I've danced in front of people because I was a professional teacher, but also I've now sang in front of people and I've acted in front of people. All things I never would have done. Why? Fear of judgment. So a lot of psychological processes, when you really want to do something, but you're too fearful of doing it because of, the fear of ridicule or comparison or the fear of judgment, that creates a lot of tension in your autonomic nervous system. So again, and that could create tension and discomfort because now your movement is restricted because your body's so tense. So little things like that can be what's causing people's pain, but they're not going to identify that as the actual issue. So if someone comes to me, my job at the core of postural restoration is that I know when someone lies down, their pelvis is going to be forward on the left, back on the right. Forward on the left, back on the right, and oriented to the right. So their pelvis is going to be turned to the right. That's called the left AIC. We're rightward-oriented people because that's how our sensory system works. So I already know they're going to be in this pattern when they come to see me. Otherwise, they wouldn't come to see me. Now, my job, if their pelvis is this way, which indicates right stance. They're over on the right side of their body. PRI is just trying to get them into left stance. But it comes back to this asymmetry that's built into all of us and the amount of tension that's built into all of us. It's quite simple conceptually. You're breathing with your right diaphragm and your left diaphragm is not doing a lot of work. So what happens? Your tension levels go up. Physiologically, you enter into a state of fight or flight because to make up for the loss of the left diaphragm, because you've become too right-sided, your normal asymmetries have become too asymmetrical, you're working on with just one diaphragm. The left diaphragm assumes a more postural role. So what happens? To make up for the loss of the left diaphragm, you use your neck. And so it becomes compensatory breathing. That's what PRI is treating. Patterns of compensatory breathing at its core. On this channel, whether I'm talking about vision, teeth, heels, whatever, at its core, posture restoration is still trying to do one thing and one thing only. Yeah. Get you to breathe with your left diaphragm, which means your pelvis has to rotate back to the left and become able to stabilize yourself on your left side and take a breath in without your neck or your lower back kicking in. That is the core of posture restoration. It's not treating any type of pain. Your pain is occurring from a posture restoration perspective is because of tension that has you trapped over on your right side. And now your brain, you're too unstable on the left, so your brain won't let you go there. So even your brain is anxious. It doesn't want to go to the left because you're not stable over there. So that is the underlying issue, is tension. Even your brain gets fearful of your own tension. And that is really what links everything together. So there are people that come to me and I can change all their tests. I always say it takes about 3 to 6 sessions to get people feeling, really good. Most people will feel significantly better after the third. The moment I can get somebody, get their pelvis to the left, stable, feel their left glute med and their right glute max, which holds their pelvis in the appropriate position in which they can take a breath in without using their neck or their back. In order to do that, in order to feel those muscles appropriately, like in this video here.
And the payoff is when you keep your left foot down and you pick up your left knee without losing anything, without rolling backwards, there you go. without rolling backwards. And breathing, still got left abs, still expanding the right side of the rib cage. Right hand is supporting you. You could push your left elbow down into the floor a little bit. All right.
I'm showing you what a technique that would be doing that looks like in a very difficult position. If you can do that, by default, you've decreased tension a lot. You've inhibited overactivity of inappropriate muscle activity of the neck, the lower back, and the hip flexors. So if you can do that technique, by definition, you're breathing better, you're stable, you're much more stable. You're not relying on your neck anymore. Your tension levels have come down. If those things didn't happen, you wouldn't be able to do that type of technique. So that's my goal. To get people into a technique like this is my goal. And usually it'll take about 3 to 5 sessions to get them there. Now, a lot of people are not going to do more than 1 session, even though I says it's going to take 3 to 6. And I tell them pretty quickly if I don't think I can help them because of something else going on. But if you don't give it a shot, you want resolution immediately. PRI makes sense to you. You want resolution immediately. You do 1 session. Maybe you don't feel enough of a difference, even though you know your ranges of motion have changed. You see it on video. I've shown you how all these ranges of motion change. Yet still, you don't feel it enough. So you just assume that PRI is just another thing that's not going to work. So now you get even more anxious. And now you just engage in this cycle of anxiety. And then the anxiety drives more pain and you're just stuck. You have to cut that circuit. You have to cut that cycle somehow. And any of these books, the Sarno book or the Unwinding Anxiety, could help in that situation, because at that point, giving someone more techniques is probably not going to overcome the anxiety. You have to become aware. And that's the key, is awareness. Awareness of how your brain is using your anxiety over the non-resolution of symptoms as another way to distract you. And for some reason, your brain decided that this was rewarding behavior, and you're just going to get stuck in this loop. This is the loop of addiction. This is what happens. It's anxiety and tension produced by that anxiety, and it just keeps you in this cycle. So if you realize that your physical symptoms have no basis in the physical body itself, aside from tension, like you have no injury. That's the thing. So where's it coming from? Well, you got to give it time. It's not going to unwind in, just one session for the vast majority of people. It takes time to retrain these things, to retrain how to get your body to the left side and stabilize, because yeah, you do have to use your muscles to stabilize so that you can take a breath without using your neck. So you cannot go back to, the moment you kick in your neck or your lower back to help you breathe, you're going to go back to the right side because of our asymmetry. So you have to step in and become aware that there's nothing physically wrong. The pain is annoying, no doubt, I've been there, but it's not life-threatening. And oddly enough, I was never worried about the pain returning. I had tons of pain, but I felt so much better after finding PRI. The SI joint issues disappeared almost immediately. Every now and then, over the next couple of years, I would have some SI joint discomfort, but I was never fearful of the pain coming back. Recently, the past 4 years since COVID, not surprisingly, there were other symptoms that I was dealing with. Sounds in my ears, these humming sounds and clicking in my ear, that really, really disturbed me. And what I had to finally realize was, and pain, I'm not really in pain, but I would have, and of course my ears have been ringing since I was 13 years old. But what this book, the Unwinding Anxiety book, has helped me realize is that it's not that the Sarno way of thinking would be that the symptoms are a distraction. That could be definitely it. But for me, I think that wasn't it. The symptoms made me think about the symptoms and research how to resolve the symptoms. And for some reason, my brain thought that was a rewarding behavior. And the more I thought about the symptoms, and the more I researched the symptoms and how to resolve the symptoms, the more they would pop up. But I kept noticing that the symptoms, this humming sound and the clicking, would always happen at certain times, or more likely to happen at certain times. And one of those times was usually like I'm just sitting there watching TV, doing mindless things, when my mind was very occupied with work or dancing or singing or whatever, acting. I didn't really have the symptoms. It was only when I was alone and my brain had nothing else to focus on. Perhaps my brain is still nervous about when my mind has nothing to focus on, thinking it'll go back to my teenage brain when things got pretty bad. My mind went to very negative places. So maybe it's never updated itself. It still thinks it's 1991 or 1992 when things were not so great. And that persisted for quite some time. But so what I realized was, once I became aware that me thinking about the symptoms in regards to how can I resolve them was the loop that I was stuck in. I mean, the ringing's still there. I don't think that's going to change. But the clicking and the popping and the munching and the humming and all that has greatly decreased. And if I do hear it, I just kind of laugh at it and it's gone. So I have done this successfully. I know other people are going to need this, because the more you stress out about, if you can do a technique like I showed, quite frankly, there's nothing physical at that point because you're stable. Because if it's not a stability issue, there's certainly not a strength issue. That's a hell of a hard technique. Trust me. So physically, again, no one has found anything structurally wrong with your body. From a PRI perspective, you're stable. You can inhibit all of that tension. So what's it going to be at that point? It could be this cycle of tension and anxiety that you're stuck in, that your brain just keeps playing on you until you can step back, become aware and say, oh, wait a minute, this pain's not here all the time. When is it actually here? So as an example, I wish people would have watched a video that I made called How the Environment Postures You. To me, it was just revolutionary because I made it. But what was it? I would highly recommend you watch it. I made it a couple months ago. But it shows how my friend, who's a dance teacher, he's neutral in every part of the dance studio except when I test him in the small area that he teaches most of his private classes. So what does that mean? Well, your environment will create tension. The people you're around will create tension because your brain is making associations that are not rational. You could hear a name from your past, and I've done this with people. I'll have them look at a name of somebody from their childhood years that they didn't like. They're completely neutral. They look at that name and now they can't touch their toes. So that name tensed them up. So what if you hear a name, Chris? Maybe Chris was your bully back in 6th grade, and now you hear the word Chris. or you're working with a guy named Chris. Has nothing to do with the guy from 30 years ago. Yet your brain is not making that leap. It's just saying, oh, Chris, that's a threat. And you tighten up. And now all of a sudden, like, man, my back hurts whenever I'm with this person. Or maybe you don't even associate with this person. But there's so many things out of our control because our brain is constantly on the lookout for threat to keep us alive. So there's little things like that that can create tension and you're not even aware of it. But it doesn't matter. The moment you realize your pain or discomfort is no longer physical because you can stabilize. You got that 3 out of 5 on the strength test. You can do the technique like that. Yeah, you're probably not physically, it's not a physical issue at that point. You have to become aware and step back and say, this could be my mind messing with me, unfortunately, and it's not productive anymore. And if you can just ignore it at that point, which is easier said than done, trust me, I know. But once I identified my habit loop, my loop of what was keeping me in that loop of anxiety over symptoms, symptom, anxiety, more symptoms, and said, oh, wait a minute, this is a trick. It wasn't the trick I thought it was playing, it's a different trick. Again, the symptoms have pretty much disappeared for the most part. So you got to realize, and that's what is such a genius about this little Tibetan Buddhism book, is that your brain is constantly working off of incomplete data. In this book, they're talking about how your visual system, you see something green in the distance and you say, that's a tree. Did you actually see a tree? No, of course you did not, because your brain is guessing that you saw a tree. All you can be sure of is that you made a sensory contact. Your visual system made a sensory contact called frequencies of light that hit your retina and then go back to your brain. That was the contact. And that sets in motion a series of mental processes that says, hey, it's a tree. You don't know that because that's what mirages are. So the point is our visual system is guessing as to what's out there. Even our own body is somewhat foreign to our brain. There's a great book called How Emotions Are Made by Lisa Barrett Feldman, something like that. And she says, from the point of view of our brain that's locked inside this hard case, this hard shell, the body is just another source of sensory input that it has to figure out. No different than seeing a green blob in the distance and trying to figure out whether it's a tree or, a small house, whatever it's going to be. Your brain's constantly trying to figure things, what's going on out there and what's going on in here to keep you safe and to keep you oriented correctly and moving in the right direction. And sometimes it guesses wrong. And if it keeps guessing wrong, well, you get stuck in this pattern of behavior that is inappropriate, or a pattern of thought and fear that's inappropriate. But your brain doesn't update its model. And all PRI is trying to do, in my opinion, is update the model. Give your brain something different to sense and feel, to realize, oh, there's a different way of moving. I don't have to stay over on my right side completely. I can get totally on my left side and stabilize if given the chance. But any type of behavior, you have to become aware of it and then give your brain a different option. And these books and Postural Restoration is trying to do that. And if you're not resolving your situation through PRI and you have competent instruction, which is not always the case, especially if you find people who say they do PRI but only done maybe a couple seminars, you want to find someone on the website in general. Then if you've had that and you might be in this type of situation and you might want to start investigating these types of things.